there are some points, legal points I want to make. And I would like to, one of the things that I've told Mark I would like to inquire about, but he said, no, we don't need to get into that. But I would like to know what it's going to take, what the people that are attending this meeting thinks, what do people think it's going to take for us to bring in some real justice into the tax situation? So while I'm making this presentation, if you're thinking about it, like Tapster, what does he think it's going to take for us to win? I'm firmly convinced, having got decades under my belt dealing with the income tax, as well as Joe. The federal income tax is the primary support for the federal government, but it is used to milk the public of resources. And my firm conviction is that it's being misapplied. And I think that the American people would benefit from having the federal income tax properly applied. But now, Joe, I would like to get off into something that I think is real important. And I think, let me see if I have, it vanished, I think. But I got an email. I'm gonna have to pull, oh, here it is. I got an email from Mark some days ago, and it was a statement of somebody that's in the tax movement. He's brand new and he's beginning to explore, gee, what are we going to get out of this tax movement? But I do think it's real important for people to, you know, have the benefit of me reading to him his message. Now, but before we get going, I would like, for people to know that, gee, there's a very popular argument that's floated around for, more than a decade, and it relates to what is a national. Now, I had it pulled up, and I'm going to pull it up again. Joe, did I send you a link?
You did not, Larry. You sent me, I don't think you did. You sent me six PDFs, but let me check.
I think I sent you an email that has a link, and let me get to it. National. The name of the exhibit is Nationals. So can you click on that link and display matters that I've got posted on my website? And I don't know whether some of our attendees are followers of this party, and you may be a kind of offended at one of the names in my link that Joe's going to explain. But the part of the link has the phrase, the name in the link, fake Judge Anna. And you may be a follower of hers. Well, I don't know. But my firm conviction is, having seen some of her information that she floats around, there's a lot of erroneous information. And a part of the erroneous information that she promotes is at this link. Now, Joe, are you able to pull it up?
Yeah, I'm sharing it on the screen, Larry.
Okay, let me go down to the very bottom of this page. Nationals. Now, this is something that's really important. And of course, the link right there we're on, I've got some information about the missing 13th Amendment, but that used to be kind of a hot issue. But, within the last 10 years or more, this issue of what is a national came up, and people ascribed to the name national, the word national, a lot of erroneous information. So let me explain to our attendees what the word national really is. If this is something I've studied, because decades ago I created searchable United States statutes at large. So I can, for all with the exception of maybe the last 5 or 10 years, from volume one of the statutes at large all the way up until about, volume 128, volume 129, I created searchable United States statutes at large. And the purpose of that was to, have the ability to engage in word searches. And then I would segregate, like the word person. I have cataloged and stuck in file folders, they're not paper file folders, but you know, folders on my hard drive, a wide variety of pages out of the statutes at large that demonstrate what a lot of really important words mean. And one of those words that I did is national. And here we have it on the screen. Now, citizen and resident have been popular or been useful words used by Congress for ever since 1892, even before. State, citizen, state, resident, resident, person, and citizen have been common words. There was no word known as nationals. How does the word national come into our lexicon? Well, here's what the courts have defined a national as. In Pica Bank against Knoop, an Ohio case, that court defined a national government and contrasted it with a federal government. A national government is a government of the people of a single state or nation, united as a community by what it terms as the social compact, and possessing complete and perfect supremacy over persons and things, so far as they can be made lawful objects of civil government. A federal government is distinguished from a national government by its being the government of a community of independent and sovereign states united by compact. And that comes from Black's Law Dictionary. And of course, the government of the United States is the federal government. But while many may understand the difference between national and federal government, even fewer understand, in reference to human beings, who is a national of the United States. This short memo constitutes an introduction to this topic. In the late 1800s, the United States was beginning to assert power over islands not contiguous to this country. Then, Hawaii was conquered and made a territory. With time, the same thing happened with the Virgin Islands, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Swains Island, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and similar places. Congress began to refer to citizens of those islands as persons owing a duty of allegiance to the United States or obedience to its laws. And you can click on a link there and see a use of the word national. Eventually, in the first few decades, Joe, these links on later on, I haven't changed. They were all posted on links to something that was posted on an official government website and is now changed. But you can, if you take these sites and go look at statutes at large and pull them up, you got the statutes at large volume and the page number, and you will see how Congress has used the word national on some pages in the statutes at large. But inherently, a national means a citizen of the insular possessions. One definition of this word appears in 24 CFR section 5.504, which states national means a person who owes permanent allegiance to the United States, for example, as a result of birth in a United States territory or possession. In section such and such of the Iowa Administrative Code, a national is defined as a person who lives in mandates or trust territories administered by the United States and owes permanent allegiance to the United States. An alien is a person owing allegiance to another country or government. In the Washington Administrative Code, section such and such, this word is defined as a person who owes permanent allegiance to the United States and may enter and work in the United States without restriction. The following are the only persons classified as U.S. nationals. Number one, persons born in American Samoa or Swain Islands after December 24th, 1952. And two, residents of the Northern Mariana Islands. who did not elect to become citizens, U.S. citizens. Often Congress uses in legislation the phrase citizen or national of the United States. When this word appears in this context without definition, it means a citizen of the insular possessions. But just as often when a federal law encompasses a citizen or national, that act may provide a specific definition. Such act may define a U.S. person or a citizen as being a citizen or a national, and in that event, the defined word encompasses a citizen or national. So now I hope people will understand, this word national didn't come into use as a legislative term until about the early 1920s, and it's been used periodically thereafter. And sometimes in a law of Congress, Congress will come along and say, well, a national also includes a citizen. But inherently, if you trace the origins of this word, national got its use as an international term back in the 1920s. It referred to, the insular possessions, and a lot of countries back in that time had, you know, legal control over island nations, island countries all around the world. France did, the United Kingdom did, and particularly the United States. We had a lot. And so the word national starts out as being a word to refer to not to United States citizens that live inside the United States, but it referred to the citizens in these insular possessions that were controlled by the United States. Now, let me, with this in mind, I want to read to you, let me find it again, that email I had that where you have a guy that's digging into being a patriot, beginning to learn what's going on. Now, it may take me a second just to, here it is. This is an email that Mark emailed to me. And this is a note from some citizen living abroad who is getting into the tax issue and has made a decision. I'm going to dig into it and find out what's going on. I think it's very educational for our attendees to listen to me read this email. Let me start off with it. Many of you have been asking how to exit the tax system or how to stop paying income taxes. I want to address that directly and explain where I currently am with this. Over the past month, I've been researching this topic heavily. What I found is that people claim to have used many different methods to accomplish this, some that appear legal and others that are clearly not. My focus is only to understanding whether there is a legitimate, lawful path that actually works. After initially gathering every lead I could find, I've narrowed my current research, at least for now, to what is often referred to as the American state national process or theory. I call it a theory simply because I'm still in the process of verifying and understanding the claims being made. Right now, I'm working through a massive amount of information. Number one, hours and hours of video material explaining the concepts. Number two, numerous websites and documents to sort through. Number three, federal tax codes that need to be read and properly understood. My goal is not to blindly promote any of this. My goal is to fully understand the claims, verify the claims, and determine whether they actually hold up when you examine the law and the processes involved. If the claims do not hold up, my next step will be to organize everything into a clear, simple, step-by-step process that the average person can follow and verify for themselves. Most of the information currently out there is scattered, confusing, and buried under legal jargon. I want to see if it can be distilled into something practical and understandable. This is also my way of giving back to the community. Because I currently live abroad, things like protesting or participating in local activism aren't really accessible to me right now. So instead of putting my time into researching and organizing information that could potentially help others understand this topic for themselves. That said, this is a huge undertaking, and there simply aren't enough hours in the day for one person to go through this. So here we have a guy that's been attracted to, this issue. We're state nationals. And so he's examined websites that are making this argument. And he's been into this about a month, and he's really diving into and wanting to pull together everything he can so that he can explain this argument to others. Now, this argument's been around for a while. As I've told you before, what most of the people that are promoting this, they ignore the origins of who is a national. And nobody addresses, even though if you really did some historical digging into national, you would have found, what I just explained at the beginning of this, my explanation, who is a national. And a national starts off long ago as a word to refer to people living in the insular possessions. And now occasionally Congress will come along and instead of, when it refers to citizens at home, citizens abroad, and even people that live in the insular possessions, it sometimes just groups them all under the term nationals. But, to say that it has some significance in the way that's being currently promoted right now, it's wrong. Now, I hope that people understand that. I wouldn't mind if anybody's got some questions about that before we get into the meat of this meeting, ask up right now. Does anybody have any?
You have to raise your hand if anyone has a question.
Well, apparently we don't. But I would like for, this is one of the problems with the tax movement, with the freedom movement. The freedom movement is based on, constitutional concepts, statutes, and there's just been a lot of erroneous information that floats around. And that erroneous information has got a lot of people into trouble. I've had to defend people in court who have come up with some wild and crazy ideas. They get indicted, and boy, that's not a comfortable place to be in. To have your liberty at jeopardy because you believed one of these arguments. And there have been a lot. There have been a lot of people in that predicament. Well, since we don't have anybody, Joe, let's get into the meat of the program tonight.
Alrighty. So we had these
I've got about 6 files. And one of the things I would like to, one of the things Mark wanted to go over is something that I mentioned during the course of some of these prior programs. So I think the best thing to do is, let's start off with, there's a file I sent to you, SS Act defined compensation. So can you pull that up? That's just a real quick little.
there we go.
Now, here you have one of the Social Security Acts in 1935. Now, now that we're on Social Security, let's deal with that issue. In 1932, Congress came along and attempted the first round of Social Security legislation. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court found that first act unconstitutional. And then, that decision came out in the summer of 1935, or I think about June of 1935. After that Supreme Court, and that case is mentioned, if you go over to my website, click on the folder, the memo dealing with treaties. And, I've tied it into treaties, but the case finding the Supreme Court decision finding the first Social Security Act unconstitutional is there. Now, after the Supreme Court found it unconstitutional, you would think that Congress would come along, if they're going to do it again, they would start the constitutional amendment process. That did not happen. Within less than 3 months after the United States Supreme Court found the first Social Security Act unconstitutional, Congress comes along, I think it's in August of 1935, Congress passes the current Social Security Act. And you can't tell me that the decision in 1932 dealing with, the validity and the reach and scope of the Social Security Act, doesn't have some effect upon, how you construe the Social Security Act. But, here we have that second round of Social Security legislation, which is the one that's in effect today. And even that was challenged, the constitutionality of it. But that went up to the Supreme Court again. And the Supreme Court did not this time, for the second round of Social Security legislation, hold it to be unconstitutional. Now, that has a bearing. That's something that's real important. But, in this 1935 Act, Joe, go down to where I highlighted in yellow. And, Joe, you will make the exhibits we're using during the course of tonight's meeting available to our attendees, correct?
Well, or either me or Mark through
Oh,
Telegram.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, here you have, in this, Social Security Act, there's a legislative definition of the word compensation. And so look, most people think of compensation as, something different from what is defined, it is provided as the definition in this act. So Joe, let's just go down to look at it again. The term compensation means cash benefits payable to individuals with respect to their unemployment. Now, most people, just taking the word by itself would not reach that conclusion. But here you have a special definition of compensation. And people wouldn't come up with, you'd have to look at the definition in order to know what it means. And most people wouldn't come up with this definition on their own. Cash benefits payable to individuals with respect to their unemployment. Now, Joe, let's get over into income. And during the course of some of our previous meetings, we've dealt with income, and I have found that, covering an issue, over several different meetings, dealing with a different part of, a particular concept, is always beneficial. But here on the screen, we have specific definitions of income appearing in the Income Tax Act. For example, in the 1894 Act, Section 27 of that act defined income. And here's what the section itself says. From and after the first day of January 1895 and until the first day of January 1900, there shall be assessed, levied, collected, and paid annually upon the gains, profits, and income received in the preceding calendar year by every citizen of the United States, whether residing at home or abroad, and every person residing therein, whether said gains, profits, or income, be derived from any kind of property, rents, interest, dividends, or salaries, or from any profession, trade, employment, or vocation carried on in the United States or elsewhere. So let's take a look at that. Here in the 1894 Act, you see this phrase, every citizen of the United States, whether residing at home or abroad. Hey, Tapster, is that all the citizens? Tapster?
Oh, I didn't realize I could unclick my audio.
Oh, okay.
I believe it would be. They say
Yeah,
that
okay.
citizens here, there, and everywhere. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's what I do. Well, then who in the world are the other people that would be encompassed in this? Residents.
Residing therein, right.
So here we have in the 1894 Act, Congress is mentioning two classes of people, citizens and residence. And I don't think I include resident. But let's move down to 1913. That subject only to such exemptions and deductions as are hereinafter allowed, the net income of a taxable person shall include gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services, blah, blah, blah. Going down to 1916. Now, the point I want to make is this is the reason why people need to get that flash drive. The flash drive has all of the acts, and the acts are real important. And the flash drive is organized so that you can just scroll through it and you'll run into the 1913 Act and Regulations 33. And so you can pull them up. And all you have to do is in a chronological progression, you can pull up all the tax acts. So one of the things that you'll find out is, you can find how Congress has used in the tax acts these words: citizens, residents, and persons. So like here you have the 1916 Act. Dealing with income. That subject only to such exemptions, deductions as are hereinafter allowed, the net income of a taxable person shall include the gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation from personal services. Now, in this situation, you can see, that gains, profits, and income are something different from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal service. Would you agree, Joe?
I absolutely would.
Let's move on down to the 1918 Act or 1917. Well, hey, in light of the hour, let's move on. Let's move on to 1919. Gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, compensation for personal services. So it's real clear all the way up to 1919, that gains, profits, and income are something that arises from, separate and distinct from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. Now let's go on down to 21. Revenue Act of 21. Go on down to where it says page 238, Joe. It includes the gains. Oops, you went past it. It includes the gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. So in this situation, all the way up through 1922, you have this common, frequently used description of the object of the income tax, and it is the gains, profits, and income. And you have a rule of statutory construction that, when you have words like this, each word, a word in a statute, a an animal, a law that's providing for animals could describe the animals as dogs, cats, horses, and cows. And those would be the only animals that the act would apply to. So and no word would mean the same thing over and over again. Typically you wouldn't say an animal includes all dogs, 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 dog. Every word is something different. So here and in this situation, you can see the gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, compensated for personal services. Gains, profits, and income are something different from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. Let's move on to down to 1924. Revenue Act of 24 read the same way. Section 213, for the purpose of this title, except as otherwise provided in Section 233, the term gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. So using those rules of statutory construction, words are not repetitive, and words that are appearing like this, they're all different. They don't mean the same thing. So salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services is clearly, historically, from the prior acts of Congress. Only in the income tax are something different from gains, profits, and income. Joe, let's go down to 26, 28, 32, 34, 36, 26. For the purpose of this title, except as otherwise provided in section 233, the term gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. So here you can plainly see that in the 1926 Act, the income or even gross income was encompassed gains, profits, and income, but gains, profits, and income came from and were different from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. Joe, let's go down to 28. In the Revenue Act of 28, it reads the same way. General definition, gross income includes the gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. So again, we see that income is something different from salaries, wages, or compensation for personal service. And 32 read the same way. Joe, go down to it. Gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. So it's the same thing as in 1913 and 1916. And 34, gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, compensation for personal. Well, it looks like to me we're saying the same thing over and over and over again. Virtually every 2 years in the section defining income or gross income, it reads the same blooming way. Joe, let's go down to 36. Again, it reads the same way. Gross income includes the gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. Let's go down to 38, Joe. Well, it looks like to me it reads the same way. Gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, and compensation for personal services. 39. Now, it's real important for people to understand these old acts. Now, once if you get the flash drive and start taking a look at it, it's not difficult for you to see that, virtually every 2 years between 1916 all the way up to the 39 code, virtually every 2 years, Congress is coming along and passing another income tax, but it's imposed in lieu of the previous one. And so it's real important for you to understand that, Congress is, gaining experience. The Commissioner of Internal Revenue, the Treasury Department, is gaining experience from the administration of this income tax. And so they've got to iron out a few kinks. But in the overall broad picture, too much is always the same. But it's real important to understand, that by the time you get up to the 1939 code, which is on the screen, you can see that gross income was derived from the definition of the statutory definition of gross income that appeared in the old acts. So by 1939, you have gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, compensation from personal services. Now, here's what happened. The 1939 code it pulled together. You had all these tax acts that were scattered everywhere throughout the United States statutes at large. And, all of the currently active in December of 1938, you had a number of tax acts of Congress that were still in effect. And so by 1939, what they're doing is they're pulling all these tax acts that are then in effect, pulling them out of the statutes at large and sticking them into a book called the 1939 Internal Revenue Code. And, at the end of the 39 code, you said there was a section that said, well, everything that's included in this act that exists elsewhere, the statutes at large, that provision of the statutes at large is repealed so that what is contained in this Internal Revenue Code is what it contains the currently active income tax acts. Now, here's something that's real important, the 54 code. The 54 code, in one of our prior meetings, I explained to our attendees, the current Internal Revenue Code is the 1986 Internal Revenue Code. How did that come about? Well, in 1986, Congress passed a law that at that time we had the amended 1954 Internal Revenue Code. But in 1986, all Congress did was change the name of the 1954 Internal Revenue Code to 1986 Internal Revenue Code. Well, where does the 1954 code come from? Well, at that time, all the tax laws were contained in the Internal Revenue Code of 1939. So what Congress did, it still embodied, the taxes, the way it was structured in the 1939 Internal Revenue Code. But they rewrote things. Their purpose, they said, well, we're making it simpler. Is there something that's different here? The gross income section in the 1939 Internal Revenue Code, we have just seen that. And you have seen that constantly Congress said, well, gee, gains, profits, and income is derived from wages, salaries, and compensation for personal services. You got it, Joe. However, now the 1954 Internal Revenue Code, now if you read, there were books that were published in 1954 that explain what Congress was doing. It's real important for, legislative explanations for laws appear in these congressional reports. And that's real important for making a determination of what a section of law means. So how in 1954, look, something's different here. There was the United States Supreme Court had defined income, not a whole lot different from the way Congress had defined income in the acts before 1939 and in the 39 Internal Revenue Code. Now here we come along and something is a little bit different. Now Congress, whereas before gross income was derived from wages, salaries, and compensation for personal services. Now this concept, this appearance that gross income is derived from, now they're saying it's a little bit different. Now it's, it includes these following items. And they don't, Congress doesn't tell you whether these items are sources or income. It just simply says the following items: compensation for services, including fees, commissions, and similar items. Now, is it, the committee reports you can look into in reference to the specific provisions in reference to the specific section of the Internal Revenue Code of 1954, they make the statements, well, nothing has changed. Gross income still means what it meant under the 39 code. But let me just see. Do you participants think that there is something in section 61 that makes it appear to be bigger and encompassing something that under the 39 code where it would be clear that it's not income? And now one of the items that appears under section 61, compensation for services. And compensation for services under the 39 code, you can plainly see, oh, it is the gains, profits, and income derived from compensation for services. And you could consult the regulations under the 39 code is what is compensation for personal compensation for services. Now it makes you think the compensation for personal services, whereas under the 39 Internal Revenue Code, it was a source of income. Now it appears to be income. Is that what I would like to ask? Hey, Jerry, what do you think? Can you
Hey,
chime in?
Jerry can unmute or
Doesn't it look like that there's been an effort here to make it appear to be that, once you study the prior acts, prior income tax acts, in reference to income, doesn't it appear that, the 54 code is misleading? And, the committee reports, if you take a look at the published committee reports in reference to the 54 code, they say, hey, section 61 means the same thing as section 20, the same definition under the Internal Revenue Code of 1939. However, it looks like section 61, there's an effort to make it appear to be more encompassing than under the 39 code. Would you agree, Tapster?
Jerry unmuted.
Oh, okay, Jerry, what do you think?
Yes, I agree. I agree. They're trying to make it look different.
Yeah. So isn't this just a simple little explanation, a good reason for, if you're wanting, and it's not difficult, it's just different. And, I think I've explained in the prior meetings we've had, having access to the old acts and seeing how, hey, they're interrelated. Oh, that's important.
Larry, I have a question. So
Sure.
I'm sure the answer is no, but so the committee reports confirm where, they will explicitly say 39 section 22 definition is the same as the 54 66 and 61 definition, but do they also say anything about why they changed language?
No, they just
What a surprise.
I think we can draw the conclusion.
Right. Well, it's the
When
question.
if you sit down and take a look at all the old definitions of gross income under the old acts, and you can see, hey, people had kind of a different impression, and it was that different impression was based upon what Congress was saying, not only in the acts themselves, but also in a wide variety of things like committee reports, regulations. It was a lot more refined and specific. And so later on, when they come along and they're doing these things that you can see with the 54 code, you can plainly see that, well, there is a concerted effort here to make it for the Congress to try to expand
Well,
what's
and also,
going to say about income.
there were many different changes that went on for the 54 code, including separating out the ATF excise taxes, right? When you had
You had the same thing under the 39 code, but the 39 code, well, go look at the 1938 Act. And the 38 Act was primarily devoted to, and let's say the 36 Act, it was primarily devoted to the income tax. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what else they had included in it. But, it was still, most of the tax acts were scattered elsewhere, including the taxes on booze, wine. That's my dog. Hey, be quiet, little girl. And, tires, booze, cars, gasoline, all those were kind of scattered everywhere. And so you don't have that combination in one act of all the tax acts until the 39 code. The Congress had been trying since 1926 to, codify all of the, titles of the United States Code. And so the Title 26 contain the tax laws. And only by the time you get up to the 1939 code do you have, included within one act of Congress, all the booze stuff. And the booze stuff was combined in the 39 code, and it stayed that way, from that time forward. We still have the booze stuff, the booze taxes. Title 27 contains those, but it's a lot more organized now. And you can only by going back through and taking a look at these old tax acts do you begin to understand what Congress has been doing. And once you have access to all the tax acts and the regulations, you can see what was going on. And that's the reason why it's so important for, I may sound like a broken record, constantly coming together and, presenting. It may seem something repetitive during the course of these meetings, but there's a reason why I'm trying to pound things into people's head. Now, hey, we've only got a few minutes left, less than 10 minutes. One of the things I wanted to do during the course of this meeting was to inquire of our attendees what they would like to learn. And I would like to ask them, what do they think is going to require for us to bring about greater tax justice for the American people in the tax battle? So, hey,
Well, I
Jerry.
bet the settings are such that people can unmute themselves, but if they, two or three unmute at the same time and start talking, somebody may have to bow out. But anyone that'd like to speak up,
I would like to know what y'all want to learn. Because one of the things I would like to do is, we started off during the course of this program talking about some blatantly wrong legal arguments, like national.
Helen politely raised her hand, so maybe we'll
Okay,
just
Helen.
Helen, go ahead and unmute and
Well,
go.
what I'd like to say is that it's real important to watch what the Treasury decisions tell you, because, in all due respect, the Treasury and the Secretary of Treasury is the one that is given that authority to write that tax code, and it's their decisions that apply. So whatever they change and however they define it, that's the most important thing.
Oh, you dropped off.
Yeah, I think we lost you, Helen. Oh,
No, you didn't lose me.
okay. We didn't hear you for a second, so
So were you able to hear what my
Well, hey, so the last 30 seconds of what you just got through saying.
the Treasury decision, since Congress gives that authority to the Secretary of Treasury to create the Internal Revenue Code, then it's those decisions that apply. And it should be those things that we should be holding on to, the definitions that the Secretary of Treasury gives in those decisions.
very
Well,
good
can
point.
I correct something that I think is erroneous? It's
Sure.
Congress. Congress is the one that writes the tax law itself. But since the late 1800s, Congress has come along and periodically has been granted to the public official that's administering a law that they have drafted, authorized them to, write regulations to tell the public how that administrative agency is enforcing the law. That's really the purpose of regulations. And so, you don't have, Congress hasn't granted, if what was going on was what you just said, I would be making the argument about unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority to the Secretary of the Treasury. No, these administrative agencies are given authority to implement the law and then in regulations inform the public about what they claim is, how the law works and what the meaning of terms is. And if you disagree, then that's something that can be challenged in litigation. But we haven't gotten there. We have this concept, Congress cannot delegate to an administrative agency, the authority to write the law. That would be delegating its legislative authority. What Congress has done is typically granted to all sorts of administrative agencies, including used to be the Bureau of Internal Revenue, Secretary of the Treasury, and Internal Revenue Service. gives them, you know, authority to tell the public how they are going to administer the law. Now, that would lead us to one of the things I would like to get into, is the CTR laws. And, if you want to see how regulations really work, particularly at the Treasury Department level, perhaps we need to get into a study of the currency transaction laws. And there there you will see that Congress has delegated broad administrative authority to the Treasury Secretary. And, the CTR laws, the Supreme Court has told the public the obvious in its opinions. Congress has delegated broad administrative authority to the Secretary of the Treasury in reference to the CTR laws. If the Secretary did not implement regulations for the CTR laws, the law would not be in effect. The Supreme Court said that in the first case dealing with the issue of, the delegation of legislative authority to the Secretary of the Treasury in reference to the CTR laws. But I maintain, studying how the application of the CTR laws is real important in explaining what is the jurisdiction of the Treasury Department, and it shows up, in my view, abundantly clear in reference to the CTR laws.
Larry, what I took Helen to be saying is that, say, like the TD 8734, like looking at how the Secretary of the Treasury promulgates regulations is really informative in terms of what the government knows the law to be. Helen can chime back in, but I mean that's what I thought she said was very valuable. That hey, when we go to TD 8734, we find that wait, these 1099s have a very limited application, and the Secretary says so.
Right, and so like you're saying, Larry, it's what it's doing is defining and telling the public what they're interpreting as what the law should be. But then again, we have, of course, where our problems lie is in the court system and getting them to understand that. And I think there's a very limited, very small few people and an actual level of government that really know what it entails. So
that is true. And that's the reason why it's real important to have programs like this to introduce people to, the statutes.
Yeah, I think it's very important.
And what we have in this movement, we've got a lot of, y'all might disagree with me on this, but I think we just got a lot of blatantly false information that is being promoted in this movement, and that has done a tremendous amount of harm. So
I want to thank Helen for having like perfect etiquette with muting and unmuting herself.
Yeah, well, it's important though that we understand. Like, I want to know where all the errors are. Like, I'm not claiming that any one person knows more than another. I'm here just like everyone else. I need to know because I have 3 kids that are growing in this world, and that they're going to have to advocate for themselves.
Hey, Helen, back off from your speaker. Hey, can you say what you said again? Back off a little from your speaker.
I'm thinking about them, not just myself. I mean, so the saying is, I think it's real important that I'm here. I'm not, refuting anything that anyone is teaching. I think it's real important that I make an informed decision about what I'm learning, but I'm also, teaching my generation of kids that I've got growing up in this world and grandkids that will be coming. I mean, it's not just for me, but it's for the future generations that my kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, and the kids that I serve and the public. I mean, this is not taught in school. We have to teach ourselves. And so I feel like me getting it from all different angles gives me a better perspective of how to interpret what, like Larry's saying,
Hey, Helen, let me interrupt you. You're kind of fading in and out. I don't know whether it's I think it's probably a bad connection, but you're really breaking up when whatever you're saying is breaking up when it's being broadcast to us.
Yeah, I think Helen, thanks for you're really good at muting yourself so the road noise doesn't affect. But we heard like 90% of what you said, 95%. So I was very glad you said it, and it was very perfectly said. But anyway, yeah, your connection does fade out here and there, and becomes difficult to hear. All right, Larry. Well, it's about top of the hour, so
Well, hey, can I ask? I would like to know from our participants, what they would like to hear. My objective is to introduce and clarify some areas of, provide information, weekly, generate documents like we got on the screen, and then have our participants get them and look them over. And this to me it's something that's difficult or hard. What the tax laws have been, the way that they have administered them is, and they're trying to create confusion by creating so much blooming a mass of it. And in that mass, you got to figure out what's going on. But in order to do that, gee, you can, just as to understand one little point, you might have to study 40 or 50 pages. And they know that most people are going to walk away. Oh, I'm not going to study all this stuff. I'm just going to take the word of the professionals. And that is one of the ways, that they get away with, expansively administering, a lot of the income tax. And
agreed.
Treasury is a master at it.
Well, if anyone has a comment, maybe you could raise your hand, just so we don't step on each other if we a bunch of people unmute at the same time. Does Tapster or Jerry have anything to say?
I'll say something real quick, Joe.
Go for
The, the way the questions that are being asked were put into the code by design to be as confusing as possible so that they could bring revenue in, whether legal or illegal. I mean, my personal opinion is we have been run by criminal elements since 1913, or we can go back a little further. But a couple of things that Larry was talking about as far as the 1939 to 1954 code, just a couple of things between all the way up to 39, the tax was levied on the net income of every individual. In 54 is when they transitioned to the taxable income on every individual. Don't define taxable income. You make an assumption that you are that individual and you pay it. Another thing that if you go into the regulations between 1939, I'd have to look, it's in section 19.119.10, sources within, and the example is, it shows you how to calculate the tax on a non-resident alien individual engaged in trade or business within the United States having an office in place. And I can go on and read the whole thing, but it's exactly the same in 1954 regulations 1.861.8. So 39 code, a non-resident alien individual is the example. Then you go to the 54 regulations, a taxpayer engaged in trade. So they have tried to misdirect for eons, and they've done a heck of a job. And also, the courts are in the pockets of the same criminals that everybody else is, or that everybody else in government is, for lack of a better term. I mean, you look at what's going on, it's what I'd kind of like to understand. What are we hoping to get out of this? Are we hoping to try to get a case, get some kid that's just going into the workforce and going in and saying, Your Honor, I have studied this for my last 2 years before I got in the workforce, and here's what I'm looking at going all the way back, and have that case go through the courts? Because it's been said for years, we need a good case to create precedent. Well, I mean, I hadn't seen a case creating precedent that gets published. Joe won, Tommy Cryer won, Bernie Cooper, a bunch of cases have been won when you go in front of a jury. But I'd like to see a case where we hang the frickin' Treasury Secretary because he is not implementing it properly. So I'll hush. That's my two
Well,
bits.
hey, Tapster, that's what I would like to accomplish. I've got decades under my belt.
True.
Most people, well, hey, I want you to teach me so I can march into court. And I have seen that approach get us absolutely nowhere.
That's what's
And,
killed us.
I think it's high time. I would like to engineer, this is where we need some funding for it, but I would like to engineer some cases in such a way that we can make progress. That is my objective. And, when you got to map things kind of out. I think that there's a need for us to deal with CTRs and OMB numbers. And, that's going to help us, people that don't dig into all this stuff. They don't understand the importance of all this. But, we need more case authority and we got to do it in such a way that we can win. And there are issues I think we can win. But, it will not be done by, hey, I'm just going to roll out some stuff and I want just every John Q. public to go running and file this lawsuit. That has been the problem with the tax movement. We've just had a whole bunch of people, didn't know which way's up. They roll in a good issue with the Uniform Commercial Code. Hey, I think the Uniform Commercial Code is, real important. And so that's got to be combined with the tax issues. So, we have people that have some basic understandings, but then they've had their head filled with a lot of, if you want to see what I think are some bad arguments and bad promoters, I got them listed over on my website. Go to the front page and click on the link problems. And I will show to you, like for the money issue is my favorite and what I can think is the most important issue. And I have just seen how well-meaning people, but people that don't know which way is up, raise the money issue in court, and they've done a very bad service for us. Create a ton of precedents. And one of the cases I wanted to deal with this afternoon, it was one of those, Gene Lonstell. Gene Lonstell, God, decades ago, he was just a guy that, studied some tax issues. Oh, I don't have to file income tax returns. And then when he started getting into trouble, boy, I can remember speaking at a meeting where he was one of the attendees. And all he wanted to do is, I'm here to grab whatever, Poppy, I'm here to grab whatever I can. So tomorrow I'm going to throw it in court. And if you want to see, one of the cases that's available for distribution is this Lonsdale case. And you can see how too often we have a whole bunch of people that are unprepared, will kill issues. And I've had a whole lot of issues that I've developed, researched, dug out, and boom, as soon as you say something about it, hey, once you mention it, tomorrow, somebody will be in court with a poorly packaged version of that argument. And those people have just done immeasurable damage.
Well, Larry, let me ask you a quick question. If we had 500 people that could afford $100 and we put a pot together to say, okay, I mean, I trust you to be able to go in a court of law and be able to make the arguments based on the historical context going all the way back. There's no doubt in my mind that if the facts were seen all the way back through, that a jury of my peers, people that can actually read and aren't friggin' purple-haired and got some other objective, or whose paycheck was not dependent for 50 years on the state one way or another, that's a different issue. But how much did you need? 250 grand, 500?
Well, hey,
what do we need?
Hey, Tapster, now you're getting into stuff that we don't have. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be made in public and recorded and made available to anybody that wants to take a look at it.
Okay.
But there are things that need to be done that really could really that are simplistic. Very important issues to be presented in a way that you have almost a certainty of winning the issue. But that's not of interest to people that are interested in these issues. They just want to run to court. Hey, I just throw this issue. I want to win, but they don't know how to present issues.
Nelda had her hand up. Go ahead and unmute Nelda and make your comment.
I just wanted to say that you need a plaintiff and you need a defendant. And the only way,
Hey, look, we don't need to,
the only way you're going
I
to,
can pick the issues. I can pick the litigants, but one of the things we do not need is to discuss this issue in public, especially.
okay, but I'm just saying that the only way that you're going to get to the Supreme Court, or the only way you're going to get a case that it gets to be reported, is if the IRS is the defendant, not the plaintiff, because the IRS will back
No,
out.
no, no. I don't. I disagree with you.
You do?
There are issues we don't need the IRS. We don't need anybody from the government there.
Okay. All right.
There are issues that can be raised in other contexts, and that's the reason why planning, how we're going to go out and build this case law is real important. But it doesn't need to be discussed in public, where the IRS and Treasury Department and DOJ will see what we're doing.
Okay, so some of us are interested in understanding what you need. I'm very familiar with what your idea of you have to build the case. I understand that, but we need to know what the issues are so that we can find the right people to help you build the case.
Well, I would want to talk about that in a very carefully planned situation,
Okay.
which does not include what we're doing now.
Okay.
If you want to do that, maybe you pull together some people, and we have a meeting over the phone. Not under these circumstances, but I've had this laid out for decades what we need to do. But there's everybody's always, particularly the promoters. The promoters kill ideas like this. And
I think Larry, it's mostly a funding issue, because as far as finding plaintiffs and, putting pen to paper, you've already kind of mapped that out in your head, and you've talked with other lawyers. And so you really just, that's why we have the thumb drive. And so people can not only contribute to some future litigation, but they can get research that would take them forever if they could ever even put it together, that you've already put together. So, you have to be cryptic, because like you say, maybe some of our biggest fans are all working for the IRS and the Treasury Department. So, we have to learn here and share information. But in terms of that kind of a strategy, that we have to keep that closer to the vest. But again, that's why we from time to time bring up the thumb drive that has, all the old tax acts, and, seek people who would like to donate to a good cause and yet get some really good research information at the same time.
Raising funds to carry out some carefully planned litigation is real important.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we're doing it right now is through this, trying to raise funds from the sale of that thumb drive.
Yes.
But what's the information that's on that thumb drive? Nobody's ever put it together. Even tax lawyers, unless they're with these big firms, they don't have access to that stuff. Well, I built it 2 decades ago so that the average American could have access to all the old tax acts and old regulations, including the United States statutes at large.
Yes. Well, we probably have to kind of wrap it up. We typically go about an hour and 15. Still got to do the typical housekeeping. There was a question or a comment about the thumb drive. So basically, the way this ragtag group does it is that Mark has he founded a Telegram group. So if you use Telegram, the name of the group is called no más tax, like no more tax in Spanish. No más tax, N-O, capital N-O, capital M-A-S, capital T-A-X, no más tax. I'm not really super familiar with Telegram, whether you have to search for that and then you can ask to join, or Mark would have to join you to the group. I don't really know how that would work. But if you want to email me through my website that I'll be talking about in just a second, or Larry, I guess you give out your email address, Larry, or should just have them email through my website.
Say that again, Joe?
Do you want to give out your way to contact you, or do you want to just have people contact through my website?
Yeah, contact through the website. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can send me.
And I just see a note from Credbond. I was late to the meeting. Where do we get the thumb drive?
Right. So that's what I'm kind of pointing out. So anyway, if you're on the Telegram, you can certainly work with Mark directly. If you can't get on Telegram or that No Mas Tax group, you can email me through my website and say, hey, I'm interested in the thumb drive. What do I do next? And we can go from there. But generally, we ask for $100 donation, but it's basically whatever you can afford, up to $100. And then Mark will get your information, your address, and once you've decided what you're going to donate, Mark will mail you out a thumb drive. And in our experience, it's kind of like they must put the thumb drive on the Pony Express to get it out to people. It takes a while, like a week or two at least, to mail it, to get it through the mail. So just keep that in mind. Be patient as far as that goes. But meanwhile, why don't we go ahead and go through the housekeeping? I believe I'm still sharing here. So for Larry's website, if you go to a search engine like Start Page and type in Beecraft Briefs, that will take you to this search term right here, or this, I'm sorry, search result. And then you click on that and you go to the Dixieland Law Journal. Larry has all kinds of links. Here's his taxation link right here on the landing page. But he's got articles on jurisdiction and Federal Reserve and monetary system and all kinds of great stuff. My website is agentfortruth.com. And I just happened to pull up these articles that I have here, but basically go to the homepage. There's all kinds of goodies there. I like to point people to my article, that blog articles here, called the 1040A Scam. I'd like you to read that and also pass it on to others. Why is it taking so long? Yeah, the 1040A Scam right here. I also have an X account at Joseph Bannister. I'd like to check that out. Follow me there. Larry we talked about this webpage. I'm sorry, webpage. Yeah, false causes, false solutions. You can find that on his landing page at the Dixieland Law Journal. So that's about it. Larry, any last words?
Come back next week. If Saturday is a good day for everybody, maybe we'll continue through the summer with Saturdays.
Yeah, and I encourage people to join that Telegram if you have that on your phone or your computer. Mark has quite a big group that can all collaborate, share information. And actually, it looks like Mark was able to show up, get through that traffic jam. So I'm going to let Mark say a couple words. Mark, you're being unmuted. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mark, we were just ready to wrap up, but if you want to let people
Yeah.
know, repeat about the thumb drive and any last words, but then we got to wrap up.
Yeah, I just saw that. Sorry about being late. I got into traffic jams, one 35 minutes, the other one 45 minutes. So that's what it's like in the desert at this time. Anyway, so I put the No Mas Tax chat's correct spelling in the chat, the new chat for the forum for IRS Zoom. And they can go there and they can contact me directly on the No Mas Tax chat, and I will store the information and communicate that back to Joe so that we keep a record of everybody that orders. And if you're specific, whether you want a thumb drive and the book, or specific to just a book or just a thumb drive, then we will know which one you're looking for. So that's it. Sorry for being late.
Thanks. And yeah, that kind of reminds me that we typically, to differentiate between somebody that wants a book and somebody that wants to donate for the thumb drive, we just basically go on, did you donate $30 or $100? The $30 is a typical donation for a book, and the $100 is a donation requested for the thumb drive. So if you give 100, but you wanted both, there's a place there when you order, when you make your donation, where you can actually let us know, because otherwise we're kind of guessing. So be sure to express that. That'll help. Or if you can communicate through Telegram, that's great, because you're directly communicating with Mark regarding what it is you would like, what you want to donate, and what you'd like to receive.
It's very
All right.
helpful if they put the address, the mailing address, and if they want even an email.
Yes, and I did mention to them that it takes a while once you put it in the mail to actually get to them, and that's in the post office's hands. So just the way it goes.
Yeah.
We don't
I tried to
overnight
mail
them to you.
I try to mail no matter how many people, I try to mail it once a week,
Yes.
no matter how many orders.
So we do the best we can. We appreciate everybody's patience, and otherwise, that's about all I have. So we will ask, and be sure when you're on Telegram, let Mark know if you like the Saturday show. We've done Wednesdays for a long time, then we did a few Fridays, then we went to Saturday, and it seems like Saturdays seem to grab the most audience, the biggest audience. So it's a viewer supported show. So you let us know what you like, and we'll try to accommodate. All right, everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us. God bless you. Have a great rest of the weekend.
See you next week.